Hello and welcome back to this course of videos on MongoDB. Now in this video we'll continue to walk through the code behind this shoestore application. We're going to look at the login and logout functionality. Now just to show you it working live before we step into the code, if I log in with an unknown email, it would just say email is not registered in either database. However, if I input an email address that is registered, like mike@gmail.com, and I log in, it will tell me, or Michael Jackson, that they've successfully logged into both databases. And if you switch over to the register page, you will see this is already pre-populated for you in case you want to edit your registration or delist. So let's actually look at that code behind the scenes, what happens when we press this login button. So if I move over to my front-end code, main.js, and we look at the event listener for the user login. So btn login is the name of this blue button here, and we've added the event listener. As usual, we prevent default because we're doing an Ajax call. Similar to the delete call that we did in the previous video, all we need to pull is the email address, and I'm actually pulling that from here, but it's the same email that we see in here, and then that is our payload that we're going to be sending to our PHP server. Is that particular email? That is the only key value pair in the payload. So our Ajax call, it's a GET request this time. The URL destination is now login.php. For the data object that we're passing, it is a key value pair. Data key is the key and payload is the value, which again is just this key value pair, which contains the email text that we took from here. And then we'll look at the success event handler after we've looked at login.php. So let's shift over to login.php and see what happens when the payload, the email address, is received by login.php. Now the first thing I want to discuss, and this is hinted on in the last video, is many of you may be familiar with the PHP session start command here. Now this basically creates a file on the PHP server so we can persist the user's data throughout the session. Now, the interesting thing about the PHP session object is that it is stored in a file server. That's a default behavior for PHP. The default behavior for other servers is often that the session object is kept in memory. So that means that if the server has some kind of disruption and has to reboot, then we are going to lose that session object if it's in memory. However, in PHP, it's kept on a file. So it's almost as if we're persisting the session to a database. It's really as good as, because it's on a file. So I'm actually taking this to the next level by, so as well as having the session file on the PHP server, it also creates a session cookie on the browser, and we can actually see it if we go into Chrome DevTools here and we go into application. You can see here is my cookies, PHP session ID, and you can see there is the value. So this basically is on the client side, and on the server side there is a file on the PHP server that references this particular value, and when this cookie is passed to the server, it can pull out the user information and do whatever you want with it. So to go back to our code, I'm actually slightly using sessions in a way they're not normally used. Like I said, sessions are supposed to be extinguished at the end of the user session, i.e. when they close the browser. But what I'm actually doing is I'm setting the lifetime of the session cookie for 5 minutes here. With this method here, you see 60 seconds times 5 minutes. So what that means is if my user decides to close the session, i.e. close their browser, let's say for example they do it accidentally or maybe not, and then they open the Schuster application back up, they're still going to be logged in. You see, because my cookie is still active on my browser, and obviously the session, the appropriate sister session file on the server is also there, so it actually keeps it alive. So that's what I'm doing here with this particular line of code. So I'm starting my session, and then it allows not just refresh, but also, as you saw when I closed the browser session, came back in, I'm still logged in and I'm still able to edit or delist or whatever. So that's this first bit of code here. Now the next bit of code, I'm basically checking if the session variable for this particular email is already set. Now if that is the case, then when I click the login, like here, let's say I try to log in mike@gmail.com here, and I log in, I already have the global session variable populated with my email, so the system knows I'm already logged in. So I basically echo that back and say you are already logged in. And then, but if not, I continue with the user login. I connect to my Mongo and SQL databases, as we normally do with our require, through to the DB Connect file, which you see connects to my SQL and connects to Mongo. Next line of code is fortunately with the get request, we do have this lovely PHP global. We have it for get and post. So $_get pulls the data, basically the payload that I sent through. It pulls this. The payload was a key value pair. The key is data key. So you can see here from the $_get global, I'm pulling my payload, which is my email. Well, it's a key value pair, email and email text, and from there I can say that my email variable is the email property of the payload, key value pair. So now we have that. We're going to use that. We're hitting MySQL first of all, and we're going to use that email similar to what we did when we were updating a record. We are using the email that the user has provided us here when they log in. We are using that to access, first of all, the customer ID, because if you remember from on MySQL with our two tables, we need to get the customer ID use the email address to get the customer ID from the customer emails table before we can then use that same ID to pull the customer's information from the customer's table. So we're selecting the customer ID, populating it into this result variable. If it returns a null for the result because the customer ID does not exist for that particular email in this table, then we're just going to echo back and say, sorry, this email is not registered. But if it is registered, then we are going to pull the customer ID property from the results, and then we're going to use that customer ID property for a second query where we're going to select from customers where the ID is that particular customer ID. So we're basically then going to have all of our data from our user that we can then send back to the user and populate and to log them in properly. So that is the SQL code. Now on the Mongo side, similar to what you've seen before, first of all we reference a collection by using the DB object from our connect.php and then pointing at the customer's collection. The customer's collection, if you remember, this is a document within the customer's collection. And then once we do that, we are running. Again, we need to use our email address that is being submitted to pull all of the other records that we require, because we want all these fields pulled for that document once the user is logged in. Because if you remember, when we log in, we want to populate this register page here, so we need all of the user fields. So basically, if the document actually comes back as true, so it returns the fields, then we're going to echo back what you can actually see on here. Not you're already logged in. It was previously, it was you have successfully logged in. So that's what's going to be echoed. And here is where we populate our session global with the various fields that we've just returned from the database. And this actually, we're kind of going back in a for loop. This is how we managed at the start when we first tried to log in with, when you were already logged in, it just comes back with the message, you are already logged in as mike@gmail.com, this echo here. So now really the next thing for us to look at is logging out. So right now we're logged in, so the registration page is populated. We're able to edit the registration, we're able to delist, and we are logged in here. We have this log out button. If we log out, all that would disappear. So you can see the alert button that we've successfully logged out. I'm okay, and it's simply a full page refresh. So if we take a look at the code, if we look on main.js, here's the event listener for user log off here. So as usual, prevent default, AJAX request, get request, URL this time is to logout.php. Let's nip over to logout.php, and you can see very, very simple. All I'm doing is I am, similar to what we did when the user delisted, I have to destroy the cookie that is on the client that we saw earlier, and obviously its sister file, which is residing on the PHP server. So I have to, the way I kill the cookie is actually to set the time to sometime in the past. Here, that's what I'm doing here. And then I'm unsetting and destroying the session on the server. So once this code is completed, then the 200 OK will communicate back to the main.js. And on success, all I do is I alert you successfully logged out, and then we do the full page refresh to set everything back to as you see it here. So that is logging in and logging out, and some talk about actually persisting sessions past the duration of a normal session, which is a browser session, and really using the PHP session object on the server, kind of like persisting a session on a database. And so that's that, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.